Dr. Perry, welcome back.
A pleasure to see you once again, sir.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. This is our third time together.
It is indeed, and I got to tell you, as I've said to you in the past, I thought this would be good, and it's turned out to be better than good.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, because I'm enjoying it. It's always nice to have good conversations with different perspectives and different types of mentalities, and you're the professional. So
well, what I really like about it is, as you may know or maybe remember, I was on the radio for 10 years.
Yeah,
local radio, and I loved it. It was, it was a talk and people asking questions and all that stuff, and I really enjoyed it. And now, it was very expensive to be on the air, and now this is, in my view, so much more fun, so much more effortless.
Yeah.
And more of an ability to really enjoy the interchange back and forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Plus, also with podcasting like this, you get both senses stimulated. You get the hearing and also the visual.
That's right.
And if you're driving somewhere, you don't have to look at the visual; you can just hear it. And if you're sitting down, doing something, then it's a good visual to go back and look at.
Yeah. So I loved the radio.
Yeah.
I really did, and I had a huge audience of people that were listening to the radio show. And after 10 years, I finally said, "I'm stopping." Not because I really wanted to stop, because it was just too expensive.
I don't remember listening to your radio show, which I wish I would have at the time. But did you normally have guests over, or was it a solo that you did all the time by yourself, or how did that work back?
There was a guy that was running the board.
Okay.
And that was his job, is to run the board. And I would talk with him periodically, and he would talk about himself on occasion. And then the phone would ring, and people would ask me questions. That's really what it was most all the time.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like a little bit of an interactive with mostly...
what's so funny is I will periodically be out somewhere. I was on a road the other day, and there was this couple, and they came up to me and said hello, and then they looked at me and said, "You're Dr. Perry."
They remembered you.
And they did, because somehow I have I don't quite understand exactly how it is, but people consider my voice identifiable.
Well, if they listen to you enough times, they can relate it to you. Yeah. So today's podcast, what I want to do is kind of I normally just have conversations like we've had the last ones.
Yeah.
But I think people kind of know you already, and hopefully people kind of know me too. So we're going to do a little bit more direct questions so we can talk about it.
As you wish.
And pick a couple of subjects, okay?
Take it away.
So we'll start with the first one. So in your opinion, what is the meaning of woke, and do you know when it started?
Notice my laughter.
Yes. So let's start by defining it first. What do you think woke is?
First off, it's close to impossible to figure out what woke is or what the definition is. Woke is a constructed series of ideas that young people decide that are going to determine the way they think or the way they're supposed to interact with society or whatever it is. So the definition of woke, I have no idea. But I can tell you that what I have found out over a period of time is it's just complete idiot thinking.
Yeah. So, that makes sense. I think it's not necessarily preaching, but it's saying, look at me, I'm better than you because I say these things.
Well, is it fair to conclude that young people very often manufacture their own dialogue?
Yes.
So therefore, is it fair to conclude that they get so excited about their own dialogue that if you can't translate, there's something wrong with you?
Yeah.
Well, oh, please.
Yeah. So it's do you think it's something that's good for the community? You think it's something that
not even close.
Needs to be called out and that needs to shift.
Let me put it to you this way. Is it fair to conclude that as you get older, you get more fussy about what people choose to say? Because if they don't get really a good command of the language, they're going to be irritating to listen to. For an example would be, How much have you noticed that young people today use the word like every fourth word?
Is it a lack of verbal skills that they
Well,
don't
you
have?
tell
Or,
me.
I mean, I don't know.
I know.
What is it? What do you think it is?
You just described it. It's a lack of verbal skills. It's a lack of a command of the language.
You know, also what I've noticed is that people don't like silences.
Oh, of course they don't.
If you pause to think about
Yeah.
something, they automatically think they need to speak and say something.
Well, those are the ones that are afraid to speak. That's a whole different population. A whole bunch of people are afraid to speak. And yet a whole bunch of people have such a poor command of the language that it's like, okay. So, it's like, I'm thinking, I don't think so. And like, I'm not going to. Okay. That kind of thinking is enough to drive me insane. And the reason for that is that people say like all the time because they really haven't practiced having a reasonably good and coherent command of the language.
Yeah. So can we say in conclusion that woke is trying to show that you're better than everybody else, and you're
I'll call it the young undeveloped personality that wants to sound hip and cool.
virtual signaling?
Yeah, it's just stupid.
Okay, very good. I think that explains that one. So here's another question: what do you think about the technological evolution from when you were young as to what we see now? So an example would be like, the telephone,
Sure.
TV, radio,
Yeah.
internet, AI.
Well, I grew up with rotary phones.
Right.
And then there was radio, and then there was television, and then one thing led to another. And am I real familiar with all the latest technology? Yes. Can I keep up with all of it as it keeps improving? The answer is it's difficult to keep up with all of it.
Yeah.
And having said that, I remember when, for example, I was an undergraduate at the university, I remember there were typewriters that were automatic typewriters.
Were they electric already?
Well, later they were electric.
Okay.
But if you remember, hand.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I used those. And then,
you had to load the ink cartridge. You had to load the paper one sheet at a time.
Exactly right.
And if you made a mistake, you had to put the eraser paper
right.
on
and
it.
Do you remember automatic erase?
No, that was a new technology that you saw.
Yeah, well, that was an IBM product. Anyway, I learned a lot about that kind of stuff, whether it was hi-fi radio or it was recordings or whatever it was. There was a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
Yeah.
And do I think it's sort of fascinating? Yes. Do I think very often it can be too addicting or it can be dangerous?
You're talking about the typewriters? You're talking about like computers and screens that you're looking at?
Well, the single biggest thing that happens with young people today is they are so wrapped up in, are they getting enough feedback from social media? And if they're not getting enough feedback, then they're very depressed. And some of them commit suicide. Some of them are just absolutely so hooked on making sure that people are paying attention to them that they get very upset if they don't, which means they don't have any inner definition of who they are and how they're put together, which is why so many young people are so completely consumed with fear.
Yeah. So do you see that as a problem because it's very easy to get a dopamine hit now? Like for instance, when we were younger, the way we used to get our dopamine hits were, we would go out and play, and if you were playing marbles, if you won the game, you got a little dopamine hit.
Right.
And you were happy.
Yeah.
If you climbed the tree and got to the top, you got your dopamine hit.
That's right.
And now the people now are getting their hits by, getting the like, getting the thumbs up, or finding the funny video.
I'm an influencer.
Yeah, those dopamine hits are getting easier to get.
Well, actually, they're getting more and more dependent on the hit from some validation from other people.
Yeah. So, and do you see that as a negative?
Oh, God, yes.
Not
Yes.
good.
It's very counterproductive because how important is it that you and your extended family grow up with a real sense of who they are, and they are good citizens, and they're contributing to society, and they are, frankly, having a lot of self-respect? How much would you say that to do that is a good thing to do?
Yeah. Yeah. That's not good.
Well, it's good if people aren't. If people are contributing to society and they do have a good self-concept and they are able to interact with people without running around feeling either highly critical or highly dismissive or highly afraid or whatever, could we say the more they pull themselves together, the better they are for society?
Yeah. I think it also puts a bad sense of how the world is supposed to be. Because it's artificial. Everything you see on the
That's right.
on the screen is all the best versions of everything that you're looking
That's
at.
like AI is dangerous.
Why do you feel like AI is dangerous?
Simply because most people really don't know a whole lot about AI, and they don't know how it is dangerous. And it's dangerous because what it does is it takes whatever they're trying to show up, and they're trying to reposition it. And because the quality of the new AI is pretty impressive in terms of how it can make somebody look entirely different.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you don't have a really good self-concept and you are now hostage to AI, then that can really wreck your self-concept.
Do you think we're going in a trajectory with AI to where it's going to become sentient, where it grows a consciousness, where it knows it's alive and it starts?
No.
You don't think we'll ever get to that point?
No, because AI is created by us.
Okay.
The people that get hostage to AI are the people that are always looking for validation.
So you're seeing AI as a tool, not as a entity.
That's correct. And I think we really don't know what we're doing.
And a tool can be powerful and it can be strong and it can be manipulative.
Yeah.
But it could always be turned off.
Exactly right. So what I'm trying to suggest to you is the single biggest thing that has essentially put young people in hobbles or inability to do well in their lives is they're now hostage to social media.
You're right.
And they're also particularly concerned with everybody else thinks. For example, if you remember when you were 12, 13, 14, 15,
Yes.
You experienced puberty.
Yes.
And if you experienced puberty and you're a guy, then all you knew is this was embarrassing.
Right. Because it's sometimes you can't control it.
Exactly right.
And so you could be sitting there in class, and then teacher asks you to stand up and fix this board, and you're like, "Oh, I don't think I want to stand up."
What am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the reality is puberty for boys and girls is a colossal adjustment which creates an adjustment disorder. And it's more for girls than it is for boys.
Well, yeah, because if their parents didn't tell that girl that she's going to start having her period, and all of a sudden she goes to school and has an accident, that could be totally devastating for her.
And she's terrified or anxious or embarrassed or something.
I mean, the humiliation that she would face from that is crazy.
So there are two major things that has a huge impact on the rest of people's lives, and they never really think about it that much. But one of the things that started that was puberty for boys and girls. Mm-hmm. And puberty for girls was always more disturbing than for boys. And yet, the moment you went through puberty, then shortly thereafter, you and all boys and all girls experience the same thing. And it's the I need to fit in.
Right.
So the need to fit in, or I don't fit in, or I'm not the cool kids, or I'm not the popular kids, which is therefore an example of that was the movies that have come out talking about mean girls.
Yeah.
That was really funny, and yet at the same time, clearly a whole bunch of girls and boys
That were bullying.
feeling bullied and I don't fit in and what's wrong with me and those are the cool people and all that stuff. And what's interesting about the fitting in thing, it's such a big deal that, for example, elderly women to this day get very concerned about what they're going to wear to the event.
Right.
Why are women in their 70s or 80s, why is it that they're still obsessing about what to wear?
Well, I think you want to be part of the crowd. You want to be accepted.
So could we say that started at age 13?
Well, yeah, that's when you start noticing things about yourself and your surroundings. You start, opening up.
So could we say, therefore, the need to fit in doesn't ever really go away?
No, it doesn't. It gets stronger and stronger.
And so could we say that that's certainly within your control, but if you have no idea on how to control it, now you're hostage to what everybody else is doing.
Right. And I think that's where, to bring it back to circle to AI, I think that's where it could become a problem, because if the AI algorithm wants to keep you focused on the screen, then it'll manipulate what your thoughts are, what your dopamine to give you, so that you can come back and look at the screen and swipe again.
Yeah, I truly think that AI is exciting because, there's all kinds of reports about it. But at the same time, I truly think it's dangerous.
Okay, so we have to keep our eyes open on it.
Yeah, and the degree to which we are going to deliberately control it so it doesn't turn bad. It's kind of like it's a medicine that makes life really difficult, like a lot of medicines do.
Yeah,
I truly think that we are incapable of getting our arms around it because the technology is so exciting that people keep going after it.
So can I see if let me give you my metaphor. So AI is a tool, as a hammer is a tool. It's great for driving nails.
Yes.
But you can't use it to cut a piece of wood.
That's exactly
right. And so AI,
right.
We got to figure out how do we use it in a productive way where the tool is maximized and not.
To be sure.
So
that's exactly right.
Use it to drive the nail, not to build the furniture.
Well, just to give you an example, when I was in college, I grew up during the period of time called sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Uh-huh.
And I never did drugs. I was scared of drugs. I didn't like them. And I know that a lot of guys that I went to in college were just continually doing drugs. Mm-hmm. Well, some of those guys to this day are dead.
Yeah.
Because they did psilocybin and they did mushrooms and they did any number of drugs. And I thought to myself, are you trying to fit in, or are you just now hooked on this stuff? And I never did drugs. I was scared, and I never did them.
Yeah.
And everybody was smoking, too. Do you remember smoking?
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah, the Surgeon General was saying that the cigarettes were good for you.
Yeah, do you remember that?
You'd see
the doctors were saying, "Oh, I really feel better about myself."
No, I remember.
You're lying through your teeth.
I remember commercials, for Marlboro or whatever, and they had the doctor in the office, smoking the cigarette, talking to the patient. It was so terrible.
Well, you see, that's something that's really dangerous.
Yeah.
A lot of people die from lung cancer.
Yeah.
I've had patients who have died from lung cancer, and I have other patients who have been in terrible physiological issues because they take such poor care of themselves.
Yeah.
And then they wonder why they're on medication, or they're now in hospital, or they're doing whatever they're doing. That's hugely counterproductive.
Yeah. Well, it's not a guarantee that you're going to get cancer, but it's a really good chance that you are going to get it. So why play the odds if you can?
Well, precisely my point.
Yeah, that's like if I drive really fast, there's a good chance that I'm going to have a death-ending accident versus I drive careful and slow.
Well, there's that.
You can have it both ways, but you're making your chances better by being not cautious about what you do.
Exactly right.
Right.
So my thoughts are, when I think about the guys with whom I went to college at the time, and they were doing drugs on a regular basis, or they were doing alcohol on a regular basis, or they were always drinking beer at the fraternity parties.
Yeah.
If I just think about all that kind of stuff, I never did that.
Yeah.
And the reason I never did that is because I'd much prefer to play for the parties. So I did play for the parties and made a living doing that for a while. And having said that, I always thought to myself, why would you deliberately do something that compromises your health or that somehow or another perhaps makes you go to jail or makes you get seriously sick? Why would you do that?
Well, correct. Maybe because it's fun.
Maybe.
It's for the immediate reward and
Yeah.
not thinking about the consequences down the road.
Well, exactly right.
Yeah.
And this one is, well, everybody else is doing it.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, I can see why I can. What were the George Carlin? He had a famous phrase: "I don't condone it, but I understand it."
Yeah, right.
Okay, Dr. Perry, let's go to another question now.
Okay, go.
What are your thoughts about expansion of presidential powers? Keeping in mind that right now we have a Democrat president,
Yes.
and if you're a Democrat, you're going to love that idea because your president can have more power. But then if we get a Republican president in there, then the Republicans are going to like it because their guy's in power. What are your thoughts about the way your system is? Do you think it's well balanced right now, or you think that there should be more powers in the office, not necessarily for Democrats or Republicans, but for the office? What are your thoughts about that?
My thoughts are the following. I truly believe that with very, very few exceptions, most people who go into politics, regardless of whatever party they're in,
Yes.
invariably get so hooked on keeping the job and so hooked on making sure that they somehow or another get more money and they get more attention, that the idea that they would have term limits, which I think would be brilliant. I mean, you can have term limits. You can have your term for 2 years or 5 years or whatever it is.
Well, like presidents right now, they have a 4-year twice. So it's
And yet by that time, you've gotten so much money
Right.
and you've gotten so much power, you can do all kinds of crazy things and lie and cheat.
Yeah.
And I also think that, would you say that people who are really into drugs have real trouble getting off of them?
I would say yes, because they like the high.
Exactly right.
And so
could we say that a whole bunch of people who go into politics, regardless of their attachment to whatever party,
Yeah.
could we say their need to keep their job?
Yeah, having power. It's like a drug.
That's exactly right. And so could we say, therefore, they have to keep the job, and in order to keep the job, they have to keep lying all the time. It is in order to keep the job, and you want to maintain power and you like the attention, then by definition you have trouble telling the truth.
Yeah.
And what I'm absolutely convinced of at this point is the vast majority in politics, regardless of what attachment the party that they're into.
And it could be at any level too, as far as a governor, senator.
I'm just struck with how many of them lie about everything.
Yeah, well, they lie to keep the power. And
Exactly.
They say what they're supposed to say.
It's an addiction. It's
Yeah.
just like fentanyl or whatever else that you're attracted to.
Yeah. So it sounds to me, maybe I'm wrong, it sounds to me like you're okay with the balance that we have now. You don't want the president to have more power.
What I would say to you is I really have spent the last almost 60 years doing what I do all over the world. And I've been just blessed and fortunate and complimented and thrilled and very happy when I can impact people and transform their lives.
Yeah.
And what I would say to you is that rarely does that ever happen to politicians.
Yeah.
They don't ever want to have their lives transformed. They just want to keep their job.
Yeah.
And they want to, of course, get a bunch of money and status along the way. And therefore, by definition, if they did have really good character, once they get the job, their character goes out the window and they start lying about everything.
Yeah. So I agree with you. They're drunk on their power, and it's hard for them to let it go. So
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that term limits are a good idea.
Yeah. Do you think senators should have term limits too, as far as?
Oh, yeah.
Because they have
I think everybody in politics has to contribute to society, and one of the most effective ways they can do it, of course they will never do it,
Yeah.
but the only most effective way they can do it is to say, okay, I'm going to be a senator, or I'm going to be an assemblyman, or I'm going to be a this or that, and I want to contribute to society.
Well, that's how a lot of people start, and then
I don't get to do it any longer.
Yeah, I know, but unfortunately, maybe some of the people that are doing that, they go in with good intentions, but
A lot of them do.
But then the power struggle to get reelected
it's a drug.
It just flips them.
First thing they have to do is they have to call and raise money all the time.
Yeah.
Second thing they have to do is work overtime to make sure that they keep their job.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they want to meet everybody so they can do all the nonsense that they do, which is almost always is one lie after another.
Right. So, okay. Sounds like you're happy with the president's not having more power then.
Oh, I don't think it's a good idea for anybody in politics to
I agree
have
with
more
you.
power.
I agree with you too.
I think it's a really. How do I say this?
I think there should be less power because.
To be sure, let me put it to you this way. By the way, if less power, just take a look at Richard Nixon.
Yeah.
Please, come on.
Yeah.
So what I would say to you is that
he took us off the gold standard.
Well, he did. Yeah, and then one war after another.
Yeah.
The Vietnam War, that was all ego.
And here we are, 70 years later, 50 years later, paying $20 for a hamburger.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So what I would say to you is, people who are hooked on fentanyl very often can't get unstuck, and they will die.
Right.
People who are really wrapped up in certain kinds of drugs do the same kind of thing. They get hooked on, they have to keep going. Alcoholics is another example. People keep drinking all the time, or people keep smoking all the time, and then they ultimately die. And then they regret the fact that they did that because they didn't take care of themselves.
It's too late.
Exactly. So what I would say to you is, similarly, among the most toxic addictions you can have is political power.
Yeah.
And if you just look at the way people are behaving around the world in all these different countries, I mean, think about this. There are dictators out there now that are behaving in ways that is sort of hard to imagine that they would want to start bombing this country and bombing that country and killing these people. And I mean, that's just straight ambition that's wrapped up in the fentanyl, essentially. It's wrapped up in the need to hang on to power.
So you're associating the accumulation of power to the same as an accumulation of a way a drug makes you feel.
Yes.
And so you're addicted to the drugs. You're also addicted to the power.
Yes.
And the type of personality that.
And does it really, when the dictators do their behavior, do they really behave in the best interests of the country? The answer is no.
No, they're doing everything that they can to keep that and expand that power. So I agree with you. That should not happen.
And by the way, here's my biggest. My biggest disappointment of us as a species.
Okay.
We are the only species on the planet, if you know anything about world history, we're the only species on the planet that engages in wholesale slaughter of its own kind. You ever think about that?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, why would you deliberately go kill people? I mean, that just seems insane.
To keep your power.
Well, yes. Or I'm really mad because he looked at me wrong, so I decided to kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's terrible. Not a good thing.
So the point is, we are a very underdeveloped species. We are.
We're pretty young, too, but we're learning.
And, we're learning very slowly if we're learning.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. So next question, Dr. Perry. What do you think is a better system as far as for countries? Do you think a democracy like in the United States, or do you think like a Chinese version of communism where they use capitalism with communism at the same time?
Well, I'm a firm believer that a democracy is probably the closest thing to something that might be considered mental health and some form of contributing to society. So while a lot of democracies don't work very well, and you've got a lot of crazy people out there that are creating all kinds of ridiculous governmental practices.
Well, democracies are very dirty. They're
Yes. People,
not dirty in a bad way, but dirty in a way that things come up to the top. You fight the idea, you talk it over,
Yeah. Right.
You say your part, they say their part, and then something comes out of it. It's not a clean.
No,
this is what's
it's
going to
not.
happen.
Now, once again, we're the only species on the planet
Yeah.
that engages in wholesale slaughter of its own kind. A
Yeah.
quick example.
Sure.
Let's just suppose somebody came from another planet, and of the planets out there, there's, I don't know, 400,000 more.
There's a lot more.
But let's suppose people are living on some other planets, and
Yeah.
let's suppose they come over here and decide they're going to completely blow up the world. Do you suppose that we as a species will be terribly frightened?
Absolutely. Yes.
Next question. Do you suppose that we might grow up pretty quickly to somehow or another keep the world intact?
Yeah, I think that'll create a world tribe instead of a U.S. tribe versus the Chinese tribe.
Exactly.
You know,
right.
it'll be
Exactly.
the world, and we will be united. I think Reagan had a line that said that the only way we're all going to get together is if we have aliens that attack us.
Well, and in as much as that sounds kind of idiotic, the reality is it's possible.
Well, it's not idiotic because that's the way our human species have always acted. I mean, my clan's better than your clan.
I know.
And if you're blue and I'm red, then blue is terrible and red is
Yeah.
great, or vice versa. You
Yeah.
know, blue is great and red is terrible. And so how do we get away from that? Which is my next question, which is, what solution do you see to unite America and stop the divisiveness that we have now?
What I would say to you is something that I encourage you to remember for the rest of your life. Life is about learning lessons, and lessons will be repeated until they are learned.
Yeah.
A perfect example. Let's do this one. Could we say that an enormous population of American citizens are way overweight?
Yes.
All right. Could we say that's women and men?
Yes.
And could we say over the last 40 years that men and women have gotten more overweight?
Yes.
And
We can
could
say that.
And could we say that they're probably more overweight because they're medicating with food?
Well, yeah, we can say that.
All right.
That would be
they're-
one of the
all right.
factors.
If they're medicating with food, how's the food medication?
Well, it's not very good because it's filled with sugar and carbohydrates. It's
And then why are they stuffing their face and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, certainly in the last 45 years?
It's probably because that's what they're used to doing. You know, you get into.
That's not it.
No? Well, what do you think it is?
It's I'm lonely and I don't fit in and nobody loves me and I can't seem to find happiness and this is how life is supposed to be, but this is how it is and I can't reconcile the difference between it's supposed to be and how it is.
So they get the dopamine hit, the acceptance by eating the food?
There you go.
Wow. Okay.
And by the way, they want relief when they're medicating with food. They want relief. And they actually get relief after about 10 minutes of stuffing their face.
Yeah.
What happens after the 10 minutes?
Well, then you go through your feeling of what did I just eat?
Exactly right. Some form of why would I want to overeat knowing that I feel awful after 10 minutes?
Well, it goes back to maybe it's just maybe I'm trying to think about it. Maybe it's just a mental thing because I mean, Same thing happens with drugs. Same thing happens with power. Same thing happens with everything.
So could we say all of that could be reduced to what you and I would call common sense?
Yeah, it would be.
All right. And could we say common sense is a good thing, and yet common sense is very uncommon?
How do we make it more common?
Well, let's do it again. This is how life is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
This is how life is. Just imagine that's what everybody does. They put it. Let's suppose you're right-handed. Imagine, if you will, that their right hand. This is always saying to you, "Well, life is supposed to be like this."
Yeah.
But if you look at how life is, very often it's quite different from how it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Do you think that we're ever going to get to the point where social media sees a value in that and starts rewarding with dopamine hits the real picture of the person where they look like crap and they post it and then people say, "Oh, you look good," even though you didn't fix yourself?
Well, I think that people are so unhappy, they haven't got a clue on how to make themselves happy. Mm-hmm. It's kind of get your ducks lined up in a row.
Yeah.
My upcoming next book is called Pull Yourself Together.
Pull yourself together.
And the reason it's called Pull Yourself Together is because if you just look around, how much does it appear as if most everybody you've encountered seems to be really happy and doing really well? Or does it appear as if a whole bunch of them are overweight and unhappy?
No, but Dr. Perry, see, that's where the government's going to step in and fix everybody's life.
Oh, yes, it's the government.
That's it's right. The government's fault. So they're going to come in and give us all they're going to pay us, $5,000 a month, and we're going to eat the bugs.
Right.
We're going to live in a pod. We're going to just get a cab and go some places. And the government's going to pay for all that.
You realize your delusions and your cynicism are taking over.
I know they are. Unfortunately, I think some people, I mean, I'm not the majority, but I think there's a small minority of people that actually think that that's the case. That's their reality and that's their solution. Most of
it is because they are completely ill-equipped on how to pull themselves together.
Right.
That's where I come in. I help people do that.
Yeah, well, hopefully when you get your book out, you can come over here, we can talk about it, and then people can order it so they can learn how to do it.
All right.
Okay. So let me see.
All right, here, let me start with this.
So you didn't answer my question, though.
What's your question?
What's a better system, the democracy or the communist?
In my view, it's clearly, though it's less than a great idea, it's clearly a democracy.
Very good. Okay, you answered that question. And let me ask you another one. Okay.
Okay.
We already talked about that one. You see clients, right?
Regularly for the last almost 60 years.
Why so little?
You are my favorite smartass. You really are.
Smartass is okay.
Yeah.
It's a lot better than being a dumbass.
Right, that's right.
So I like smartass people.
Yes.
You're one of them too.
You think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you're talking to your clients about their things that they're going through with their mental health and with their life experiences and the guidance, have you ever talked to anybody that has had alien encounters or abductions that they've suffered?
Well, the mere fact you're asking the question is really likely to make me shake my head and say, "Oh God." The answer is, have I encountered anybody that said that?
Yes.
Only in the movies.
Only in the movies.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts about aliens and alien encounters?
Do I think that that's entirely likely? No. But do I think it's possible? Because the universe, I mean, if you really want to know how small we are, if you want to understand quickly how inconsequential we are, I always tell everybody, go to Alaska for a couple, 3-4 days. I'm quite serious. You go to Alaska, and all of a sudden, the moment you think that you're a big deal, or the moment you think that people ought to open up and attend to you, if you go to Alaska, the reality is, as somebody said to me years ago when I went there on many occasions, but he said, "Dr. Perry, you have to understand, in Alaska, it's a giant population of misfits. And the reality is, if you go talk to them, and leave them alone, they're going to be much happier. But if you go there and mess with them, they're going to leave you out in the tundra, and you'll be dead.
Yeah.
So the reality is, if you really understand how to pull yourself together, if you really understand how to be a good citizen and contribute to society and look in the mirror and feel good about what you're doing and find your smile and keep it. And then you show things like love and forgiveness and understanding and flexibility and respect. And, you do all the things that really turn you into somebody that you really feel good about, around which you have very strong self-respect.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you, I've been working on mine my whole life, and I have a lot of self-respect.
Yeah.
And I'm really not very afraid of anything.
Well, that's good.
And having said that, that's a wonderful position that I've been able to create in my lifetime, doing what I do for a living. And having said that, I can also tell you that I'm always pleased and so fortunate and so blessed to be able to do what I do for a living, because people call and they get better as a result of the stuff that I help them learn how to do. Because I don't fix anybody, I just help people fix themselves. But the reality is, does anybody, for example, have you ever gone to a doctor and you wanted a certain kind of treatment, and the doctor that you went and talked to had horrible bedside manner?
Yes.
Yeah, so have I. I've encountered those guys over a long period of time.
And you clam up. You don't tell them all your symptoms.
Well, no. And why would I want to go continue to work with that doctor when his bedside manner is horrible?
Yeah, it's not a good first look.
Okay, so here's the question. Is learning bedside manner, meaning pulling yourself together and really getting your ducks lined up in a row, probably a pretty good thing to do if you want to be a doctor?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, do lots of doctors know how to do that? The answer is no.
No, and I think that's a very important skill that, you mentioned doctors, but that goes with any profession.
Exactly. Exactly right.
My profession is my first inclination to my customers is to get the shoulders to relax. Because if they're tense and they're telling me what's wrong, they're not going to listen to what I said. But if I break the ice and I become personable and I understand,
if you take initiative to connect, it's all about connecting. It's all about what I always tell everybody. Is it's only about the relationships. Only all the time. Yeah,
and you see it right away. Their shoulders kind of relax, and you say, okay, he's comfortable. Now I can explain to him what his options are.
Exactly right.
And same with the doctor, same with an architect, same with whatever, a tennis, a coach, a life person, whatever it is. I think it's knowing how to communicate, and
it's all about the relationship, only all the time.
Yes, I agree, 100%.
And the reality is, when you are skilled with relationships, you find your smile, you keep your smile, and you don't run around being unhappy.
So what are your relationships like with the aliens?
My relationship with the aliens happen on occasion with certain movies that I've often turn off in the middle of the movie.
Or you fall asleep.
Exactly right.
Okay. Dr. Perry, I only have one more question left, and I'll leave it till the end. That'll be our closer.
Okay.
But you were talking to me. I don't know if people have noticed that you don't have the beard again anymore. You shaved it off.
I did shave it off.
But there was a reason why you did that. And
it was a medical reason.
Yeah, you told me about it. And if you're comfortable, I'd like to talk about it, because there's a lot of people that go through that where they have troubles sleeping because they can't breathe correctly.
Correct.
And so, do you want to talk about that situation with you? That way, people can kind of.
Yeah, I recently went through a variety of circumstances which caused me to go see a variety of different clinicians. And one of the things that I found out that I had was sleep apnea, which it was initially hard for me to acknowledge, because I didn't think I had a sleep apnea problem, but I did, or do. I went to a variety of people, some of whom were just really horrible bedside manner, so I had to let them be successful somewhere else. Having said that, I went to a few others that I really enjoyed, and they're really good and really solid characters in the business and their specific medical skills. So he talked to me about getting a CPAP machine. Do you know what one of those are?
I believe it's a machine that you plug in and it assists you in breathing.
Yeah, you put it on your face.
Does it cover your whole face or just your mouth,
No,
your nose?
it covers your whole face.
Okay.
And then you hook it up to this machine and you turn it on and it starts blowing air and all that kind of stuff. And I knew about them years ago, and the technology was really, really in its infancy. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that because it's just how irritating is that. Imagine in the middle of the night, you got this thing on your face, you can't move around very good, and imagine that what you're hearing is all night long.
That's not very nice.
No.
It's kind of annoying, actually.
Yes. I went on a motorcycle trip with a buddy of mine, and he put one on in the middle of the night, and I just wanted to beat the hell out of him.
Also, him having it kept you awake.
Yes.
So imagine right on your face.
I know. So anyway, I experienced his CPAP machine. I didn't wear it. He wore it, and I thought, I would want to have him kill himself.
Wow.
It was horrible.
Did you talk to him about it?
Yes.
And did he say that he kind of worked into ignoring it while he's sleeping, or?
I don't know that I remember what he said.
Yeah.
All I know is I didn't want to sleep with him again.
Right.
So anyway, so I went to this guy lately, and he said he could really help me and give me some coaching. And his guys, his associates would give me guidance on how to use a CPAP machine. The technology was much better. Good news, bad news. The good news is I tried it, and it took me about 3 or 4 weeks of practice to learn how to do it. And I was pleased that it wasn't nearly as crazy as many years ago when I thought I'll never wear one of these things. What am I, nuts?
Yeah.
Good news, bad news. The good news is I finally learned how to use it, and yet the bad news is while I could use it, I still had trouble sleeping. And so I thought that's no good because I got to figure something else out. So what I did, 2 weeks ago, something like that. I heard that, if you put this stuff on your face, then sometimes if you have too much facial hair, it disallows the CPAP machine to blow enough air.
So it doesn't circulate the way it's supposed to.
Right.
Because it bleeds too much of the air through the sides.
So I finally went out of my mind and I said, all right, okay, this was 2 weeks ago. I've always had a mustache and I've always had facial hair. So I shaved it all off, all of it. And then I woke up in the morning and my lovely wife, who I just love beyond measure, looked at me and she said, "What did you do?" and I thought, well, that was supportive. Anyway, so I did that because I thought, well, if the issue has to do with my facial hair getting in the way of the CPAP machine to work, maybe that would help. So I did that a couple, 3 weeks ago, something like that.
Yeah. Was she happy to see you without facial hair, or was she disappointed?
No, she was disappointed.
Oh, okay.
As a matter of fact, I went to the gas station to get some gas for the car, and the guy who runs it, he's a friend of mine. He's very funny. He said, "You look ugly, Dr. Perry."
That is funny. Did your wife tell you, go grab that hair and put it back on?
No, but I'm growing it back, and I'm real pleased that I am.
Well, the length that you have now looks really good on you. You should consider that, shaving it a little bit at a time.
Well, let me compliment you on your excellent judgment.
Absolutely. I do tend to lie a little bit sometimes.
So anyway, first off, is a CPAP machine something good to use? There's a lot of people that use it, and good for them. I just couldn't anymore.
Yeah.
I can't do it. I can pretend like I'm sleeping, but I can't sleep. So I shaved this and I put it on, and it still didn't work.
Still didn't work.
Not for me. So
Okay.
I went to the doctor, who I really like. He's got great bedside manner. He's wonderful.
Yeah.
Went to him, and he said, "Well, I have an alternative for you." And he has this dentist that he does some work with, and I get a mouth guard that apparently will do a very good job. And I'm really looking forward to getting that. And the reason I am is because I would love to be able to have that rather than a machine making a bunch of noise and irritating me.
Yeah, with the mouth guard, I think the way they work, they extend your jaw forward a little bit.
Exactly right.
And so it opens up the passages of air in your back, so
Exactly.
that you can breathe a little bit easier.
Very good.
And
if you're familiar with an additional treatment, it's called Inspire. Do you know about that?
No, I never heard of that one.
Okay, that one is essentially surgery.
Okay.
And that has mixed reviews. For some people, it works
Yeah, a friend of
pretty
mine
well.
had that done, and it worked for a little while. Then he went back to having to use the machine to sleep.
Exactly. So I'm looking forward to this mouth guard.
Hopefully, it'll work for you. That way,
Yeah.
it's not as evasive, and it's not loud, so it's not keeping you awake.
And if you want me to give you an update after the next few weeks,
we can always revisit it.
I'll tell you what happened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Dr. Perry, is there anything else you want to talk about, or you're comfortable with what we've been saying? Or?
I'm always looking forward to talking about
Cool.
more and more. But my guess is we'll be having to wait for our next few podcasts to do more.
Absolutely. That's not a problem. So my last question to you.
Yes.
Right now, we're about 90 days away from a presidential election.
We are.
And with the information that we have up to this point, if the election was tomorrow, who would you vote for and why?
Well, the election will be tomorrow in a heartbeat. Just so you know, I'm because I'm a board certified independent.
I like that.
Knowing me, you are not going to be surprised that I'm an independent.
Absolutely.
So, in terms of being what is it? If I'm
Democrat
Democrat
or Republican?
Republican. I think there's value in lots of things like that. I remember when I first was, 18, I thought, oh, well, I want to be a Democrat because it sounds like it makes sense. Well, many years went by and I changed my mind. And so because I understand how people behave, and I understand what their emotional circumstances are, and there's all kinds of psychological issues that people go through. Rarely does anybody do much deliberate interest and activity to pull themselves together.
Right.
Rarely do they do that. That's why you encounter tons of people who are difficult. And the reason they're difficult is they don't know how to be anything other than difficult.
Contrarians.
That's right. Or they're angry, or they're uppity, or they're depressed, or they're doing drugs, or doing whatever they're doing. So, and it's always somebody else's fault. That's probably the most popular thing that's going on in the country now is, poor me, I'm being oppressed, and look what they're doing to me. And ain't it awful? And nobody knows the pain I've suffered. I mean, that whole attraction to being a professional victim has turned into the most counterproductive way of thinking that you can possibly imagine.
Well, it takes accountability away from you.
So could we say my book that's upcoming, that's called Pull Yourself Together, it's some form of, well, what do I have to do to pull myself together?
Yeah. It goes back to the same thing I said earlier where, I'm screwing up because somebody made me do it, and somebody else has to fix it.
Exactly right.
So that's not a good mentality.
Well, once again, this is how life should be.
Because you're going to be 72 years old waiting for somebody to still fix it.
Well, if they really cared, they'd fix it.
Dr. Perry, I don't think you're going to answer the question whether you're going to vote Democrat or Republican, which is good.
You're just going to have to wait.
We'll wait to see. But I think it's maybe you agree or disagree. I think that's the beauty of the United States, that we have these two parties that
That's why a democracy is a good idea. And yet what we need in a democracy is a much larger population of people who turn into fully functioning grown-ups.
Yes, I agree with that.
And remember, it's always about the relationships, only all the time.
Very good. Dr. Perry, thank you so much for visiting me again.
Once again, the pleasure was mine. I really always enjoy seeing and talking with you, sir. And I feel blessed that I have this opportunity to keep doing this.
That's awesome. I enjoy having you, and our conversations are always interesting. So
good.
I'm looking forward to the next one.
Last thing, just to remember,
Sure.
this is how life should be. This is how life is.
Very good.
Now you got to learn, well, how do you reconcile the difference? And you might want to take the next, 27 years practicing how to do that.
Well, I think if you talk to people and get different perspectives, it helps you build that. So keep your options open.
Now you're confusing this with common sense and logic.
So keep your options open. Don't be afraid to have hard conversations. And if you have a great idea, hash it out. And if somebody pushes back, are you feeling this earthquake? We're having an earthquake.
We are?
Yeah. Look at the light.
Oh, yeah. It must be a big one.
Yeah, it was a little one, a little big one, but I felt it. Anyway, Dr. Perry, California welcomes us.
It does.
Beautiful earthquake.
It does indeed.
Mother Nature said hello. So
sometimes Mother Nature does get a little cranky with our behavior.
Yeah.
It's true.
So once again, thank you so much, and have a great one.
The pleasure is mine. See you next time.